Spring is here, the snow is melting, and I'm looking forward to enjoying some sun in our backyard. Our lawn has gotten pretty bumpy since we put it in last year, so I built a DIY lawn leveling rake to even it out. I'll show you how I did it, so stick around. What's going on, adventurers? My name's Travis. Welcome back to another project. It's still pretty early in spring, but I can't wait to get out and enjoy our backyard this summer. We just put it in last year, adding a fire pit and growing our lawn from seed. Unfortunately, our lawn has settled in over the winter and gotten a little bumpy and uneven. I did a bunch of research over the winter, trying to figure out the best way to level out our lawn. One thing I kept seeing is people using these lawn leveling rakes. They go by many names like a lawn lute or a levelawn, but they're all pretty much the same design. Golf courses use them to level out their greens. You can think of them as a grader for your lawn. Looking online, these things are actually surprisingly expensive. They go for up to a couple $100s. So I decided to try and build my own, and it only ended up costing me about $60. So I'm going to show you how to build one of these lawn leveling rakes yourself, walk you through the materials, take you step by step through how I put it together, and then finally talk about what I like about it and some things I'd change. If you're new to the channel, we are all about projects that add adventure to your life. Anything that gets you up off the couch and out the door on your next adventure. If you haven't already, please take a second, hit that subscribe button, and remember to click that little bell icon to be notified every time a new video drops. Now, I welded this lawn leveling rake together. I'd classify myself as an extreme beginner welder. I can basically stick two pieces of metal together. So if I can weld this thing, you can. Now, I know not everyone has a welder at home or access to one, so as I go through this project, I'm going to try and give you a couple ideas of how to put this thing together without a welder. So let's talk about the materials I used to build this lawn leveling rake. The bulk of the rake is built using 3/4 by 3/4 inch steel angle iron. I ended up purchasing 3 8-foot sections of this. I still have probably 5 feet left over, so I bought a little too much, but I wanted to make sure I had tons on hand so I didn't have to run out and go to the store and pick some more up. Next up, you need a broom handle. I just bought one that doesn't have any threads, and I made sure I got a nice, heavy, sturdy one. This lawn leveling rake weighs quite a bit at the end of the day, so you don't want a thin handle that would flex too much. Now finally, I had some brackets and bolts that I used to build a swivel handle, but stick around till the end of the video because this is one of the things I would change on this rake. So they aren't an absolute must. So let's jump into the design of this rake. It measures 30 inches by 12 inches. It's got 3 of these beams that go across here that kind of act like grater blades. Then right here, we've got our supports that connect to our handle. This is a swivel handle bolted onto those supports. Then we've got our socket section here to attach our handle to this lawn leveling rake. So starting off, I cut the long section and the short section here to make the frame of the rake. Now I ended up cutting these at 45-degree angles. I just thought they'd be a little easier to weld and be a little sturdier to put together. To cut the angle iron, I started off with a grinder with a cutoff wheel, but I was having a little bit of trouble getting nice straight 45-degree angle cuts, so I ended up switching to a reciprocating saw with a hacksaw blade on it, and after I did that, it was really easy to get nice straight cuts. Now the big thing here is once you get the long sections and the short sections cut, just put them back to back with each other and make sure they're exactly the same length. That'll make sure that you have a nice square frame. Since you want to keep this rake as flat as possible, I used a 3/4 inch piece of plywood that I had lying around, just so I had a nice flat surface to assemble this on. To make sure this frame went together as square as possible, I used a couple of these magnetic welding braces. You can put them in the corner there, it just holds everything nice and square. Then on the outside, I added just a normal square, just to make sure that when I tacked all this together, it was going together perfectly square. Now my welder is just a small wire feed flux core welder that just plugs into a normal outlet, so it didn't have a ton of jam. So I ended up having to weld all of these corners on both sides, and then I just ground off the weld on the bottom side. Next up, I added these center braces. So these act as almost grater blades on the inside of this lawn leveling rake. I've seen where some people use flat bar to put it across, but we had a ton of that angle iron left over. So I placed it in a bit of a V shape and then welded it into place. It actually worked out really nice because everything ended up nice and level with the edge of this angle iron. Now to do that, again, using one of these magnetic welding braces, they work really, really good for this. So you can just put it in there, and I just had an extra piece of metal here that went down and made sure that these were at a nice angle. Now, if you're not a welder, the way that you could put this frame together is instead of cutting these at a 45-degree angle, if you just cut them nice and straight, use the short section as the bottom piece, and then these long sections you could put on top. If you drilled a hole and then had a nice flat countersunk screw from the bottom, you should be able to hold everything together. Then these cross braces here, again, you could drill and screw them to this outer section. So next up, we've got our handle assembly. So it has these braces here. I cut these to length, but I didn't weld them in until I finished building our handle here. The handle uses this kind of U-shaped bracket here to attach the socket to. To make this bracket, I ended up using a couple of these little L brackets here, as well as this flat bar. I bolted them together to make that U shape. Now these are zinc coated, so it's a little finicky because you have to grind off all the coating off of these before you weld them. The zinc can put off some pretty nasty fumes, so you want to make sure they're nice and clean before you weld them. So once I had this U-shape together, I was able to drill some holes and bolt it to these support beams here. Then I laid these support beams across the rake, made sure that they're nice and square in the center, and then tacked them all into place. The last step was building this handle socket here. So I was really trying to figure out a good way to put this together. And again, we had a ton of that angle iron. So I used some vice grips and clamped this angle iron onto our handle, made sure that it was nice and square, and then put it up to our little U-shaped bracket here and welded it into place. By using those vice grips to hold these two pieces of angle iron onto our handle, it just made sure it was a nice tight fit, and once we welded it, it made a really nice socket. So to finish off this rake, I just drilled a couple holes on the backside of this socket to screw our handle into, added these bolts to attach our handle to our braces. Then finally, I just used some spray paint to paint the rake just so it wouldn't rust. If you don't weld, this handle section here could be a little tricky to do. So probably what I would do is do away with this whole U bracket here. These supports you could move in closer, and then just simply use this socket setup and put one long bolt all the way through and just put it through the handle and the socket here, and that should work pretty well. Overall, I'm really happy with the way this lawn leveling rake turned out. So some of the things I like about this rake, with building it out of that 3/4 inch angle iron, it makes this rake pretty heavy, which I think is gonna work really, really well for leveling our lawn. The weight of this rake should help spread out that dirt really, really easy, and it should make it fairly easy to handle. Simply using the broom handle to guide the rake and letting the rake do the work. The other thing I like about this lawn leveling rake is the handle socket we put on. Now initially, using angle iron for this socket, I thought it'd look a little funny or it wouldn't hold the handle very sturdy, but I was wrong. It looks really cool, and with using the vice grips attached to the handle, it's made a perfect fit for our handle, and adding a couple screws holds it on really tight. Now the one thing I would change if I did this project again is the design of our swivel handle U bracket. I had a couple of those little L brackets and flat bar laying around, so I decided to use those. Now the tough part it was very time consuming to grind off that zinc coating so we didn't get any fumes. Then after it was all assembled and I tried pushing it across the lawn, the bracket actually just started to bend. So I had to add a piece of angle iron to stiffen up the bracket so it wouldn't bend. It seems to be holding together pretty well, but I don't know how long it will last. If I was to do this again, I would use angle iron instead of those little brackets. You could cut them at 45-degree angles, then assemble them very similar to the way we assembled the frame of our rake. I think it would be a lot sturdier and would just take probably about the same amount of time. So that's my take on this DIY lawn leveling rake. I'm sure there's gonna be a couple questions after this video, so if you have any questions, please post a comment in the comment section below. Now I have to admit, I haven't tried this rake out yet. It's still pretty early spring, so I'm going to wait for a few more weeks for the grass to come in before I try and level it. I think I'm going to try and use some loam, use this rake, and it should glide over the grass really nice and push that loam down into the low spots. I'll try and put together a video when I do use this so you can see this thing in action, so keep an eye out for that coming down the pipe in a few weeks. Now if you found this video helpful, please take a second, hit that like button, and if you haven't already, please hit subscribe. We'd really appreciate the support. So that's it for this video, but I hope to see you back again really soon for another adventure project.